Scientists warned that the volcano that caused the largest eruption in European history might be getting ready to blow again. The volcano is called Campiflegre and it's located under the Italian city of Naples. Campiflegre is what's known as a supervolcano. It's so large that at one point it ejected more than 240 cubic miles of ash, pumice, and lava. Volcanic eruptions are notoriously hard to predict, but scientists writing in the journal Nature say that the volcano is nearing a critical point, identified in other volcanoes when rising magma can cause an eruption. The last time Campiflegre erupted, Italy ended up with a new mountain. That was all the way back in 1538, and it was a relatively small eruption, and an even earlier eruption was so large it might have killed off the Neanderthals. Despite warnings that the volcano could be about to erupt, scientists also made it clear that they couldn't say when or even if it would actually go off.
Tuesday, after a volcano erupted in the Aleutian Islands that reportedly sent ash thousands of feet into the air, the Alaska Volcano Observatory issued its highest alert level for aviation. The Bogoslov volcano on Bogoslov Island, which is part of the Aleutian Islands, briefly erupted about 4 p.m. Alaska time. Pilots told the observatory that a cloud of volcanic ash rose to 34,000 feet. At about 6 p.m., reports said that the cloud had mostly dissipated and did not pose air quality problems for local communities. Later, the alert level was downgraded because activity had subsided.
On December 19th, a region of the Sahara Desert was hit by a freak snowfall. The town of Ain Safra is 1,078 meters above sea level and is surrounded by the Atlas Mountains. The Sahara Desert is the largest hot desert in the world, covering more than 9 million square kilometers. It covers most of North Africa. Temperatures can reach as high as 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
What are these guys doing outside in the cold with a big hole in the ice down in Antarctica? They're not ice fishing. They are saying hello very quickly to that little, what is it, a sea lion or a seal? I can't really tell, but he looks pretty excited to stick his head out of the hole there momentarily. These guys are studying how climate change is affecting the world under the sea, and so they are putting a camera down in that hole, and they see this entire ecosystem. The other thing you really notice about this video that I think is really interesting is that you notice the water's not moving very much. Now, there are some currents down under the ice, but, you know, generally the water would be moving a lot more than this if you just go down under the ocean straight up rather than under the ice. So that's pretty cool. But look at all that color down there. You've got these huge ecosystems. Starfish, sponges, algae, worms, all that kind of stuff. Something you don't think about every day when you think about Antarctica is what's underneath it, and it looks pretty cool.
In the wake of the Christmas market attack in Berlin and the recent slaughter of Egyptian Christians as they worshipped in Cairo, Christians around the world are bracing themselves for more possible attacks this Christmas. In Pakistan, Christians are a tiny minority in the Muslim-dominated country. This will be the first Christmas the Amants will spend without the youngest member of their family. 16-year-old Wasib was an athlete who enjoyed playing cricket. He loved studying math and English and planned to eventually earn a PhD in engineering. Last spring, Wasib was killed in a terrorist bomb attack against Pakistani Christians celebrating Easter in a popular city park.
I loved my son. He didn't do anything against anyone. They killed him because they knew he was a Christian, but we forgive them in the love of Christ.
The Amant family was not alone. 75 people were killed and hundreds injured when the Islamic extremists detonated a suicide vest packed with explosives. Another 16-year-old Christian, Sharoon Patra, was also among the dead.
My son Sharoon was the most obedient of my children. I was always thought he'd be the one to take care of me when I get old. We know from the gospel, as Jesus forgives them, we must also forgive those who did this.
18-year-old son Irfan survived the attack, but hot shrapnel from the blast tore into his back and stomach, damaging nerves surrounding his intestinal tract.
God spared me so I can serve him. I want to be a missionary.
Wilson Chowdhury of UK Pakistani Christians says attacks against churches and the persecution of Christians will continue in Pakistan as long as school children are taught to hate non-Muslims.
Christians and other minorities are demonized, they're caricatured. In the case of Christians, they're often labeled as spies of the West, and this is in the national curriculum.
Well, Germany is offering over $100,000 in rewards for information that leads to the man they suspect carried out the Berlin attack.
This is the Tunisian man wanted over the Christmas market attack. Anas Amri arrived in Germany last year, but 5 months ago his asylum application was rejected. Authorities admit that before the attack he had been flagged as a possible terror threat and had been in contact with a Daesh recruiting group in the country's north.
Security agencies exchanged information about this person with the Joint Counter-Terrorism Center in November. He was being investigated on suspicion of preparing a seditious act of violence.
With the attackers still on the loose, security was tightened across the country. Police were left on the back foot after admitting that the first suspect they arrested was the wrong man. Christmas markets across Berlin reopened on Wednesday. This is Gendarmenmarkt, one of the most famous in Germany. Storeholders and shoppers alike determined to defy the threat of terrorism.
Christmas markets are a German tradition, and I think it's very important that we stay to our routine and do what we usually want to do.
Keeping up the tradition of Christmas markets after such an attack is a show of solidarity. But will the German people show as much support for their Chancellor? This attack puts increasing pressure on Angela Merkel and her open border migrant policy. And with an election just next year, it comes at a pivotal point in her political career.
The German cabinet has passed a bill allowing more video surveillance in public places. The new legislation was agreed in principle last month before Monday's fatal truck attack. The draft law would loosen data protection restrictions for video surveillance on streets and in public places such as malls and parks. The cabinet also agreed to allow federal officers to wear body cams to increase security across the country.
While Europe is reeling from what appears to be a terrorist attack carried out by a refugee, here at home, President Obama is doubling down on his efforts to offer asylum to migrants. According to brand new statistics, the president is drastically increasing the flow of refugees into the United States, with total resettlements up 77% over the same period last year, including a whopping 390% increase in the number of Syrian refugees entering the country.
As a manhunt spreads across Europe tonight, President-elect Trump says that the Berlin Christmas market attack proves that he is right about cracking down on Muslim immigration to America.
President-elect Donald Trump emerged from his Mar-a-Lago club to briefly address this week's terror attack in Berlin, his first public comment since a truck plowed into a Christmas market, killing 12.
That's an attack on humanity. That's what it is. It's an attack on humanity. And it's got to be stopped.
Asked whether he's reevaluating his plans to ban immigration to the U.S. from certain Muslim countries and establish a Muslim registry here at home.
And I use the term extreme vetting.
Mr. Trump defended his controversial campaign proposals.
Hey, you know my plans all along, and I've been proven to be right. 100% correct.
Even before German authorities declared Monday's attack terrorism and ISIS claimed responsibility, Mr. Trump released a statement saying ISIS and other Islamist terrorists continually slaughter Christians in their communities.
Now a leaked document from the Pentagon is adding to their concern on Capitol Hill. The 4 top defense priorities of the president-elect do not include Russia. This is a shift from military officials who see Russia as the country's #1 threat. This is a clear sign the Trump administration is ready for a restart with the Kremlin. Let me just point out that no country is named as a priority in this defense priority, the top 4. #1, of course, is ISIS, developing a strategy in defeating ISIS. #2 is eliminate budget caps because they want to spend more money on military projects. Cyber strategy is #3. And #4 is the wasteful spending and making greater efficiencies come out of the Pentagon. What's your take on the fact that this is definitely a focus shift, or at least it appears to be, from the Pentagon and now, of course, what the Trump administration wants to do? Your thoughts?
Hey, Ed, great to see you. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, I think it's great that we have common sense coming back to Washington. Russia is not one of the top 4 threats that America has. It's not one of the top 4 threats that Europe has. So it's important to focus on things like the Islamic State, things like cybersecurity, threats that are actually killing Americans and killing our allies.
Russia has condemned the Netherlands for allowing the United States to advance the deployment of military hardware in Europe. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova slammed the Dutch leadership for destroying its relations with Russia. The statement added that the Netherlands supports hostile anti-Russian policies. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has reportedly said that dialogue between Moscow and Washington is very minimal. Russian media have quoted Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov as saying almost all communication channels have been frozen. Relations between the U.S. and Russia deteriorated in recent years over a host of international issues, including the conflicts in Syria and eastern Ukraine.
Russia's deputy foreign minister says that his country describes, quote, as hostile new U.S. sanctions on Moscow over the conflict in Ukraine and is prepared to respond accordingly. Sergei Ryabkov says that the Kremlin reserves every right to pick the time, place, and form to react to Washington's anti-Russia measure in a way that suits Moscow. Ryabkov also says that Russia will expand its own sanctions list in response to the U.S. move.
I think these sanctions are about to fizzle out and disappear with the emergence of the Trump administration. I think this is President Obama's last gasp at trying to start a war, and he's been effectively waging economic war as well as psychological war against Russia.
According to Ukrainian officials, dozens of mini-drones supplied by the United States are prone to jamming and hacking. The 72 Raven RQ-11B analog drones have been so disappointing on the battlefield, an advisor to Ukraine's military would return them if the decision were his. The Ravens, launched by hand, are lightweight and unarmed surveillance drones, but the drones have a fundamental flaw that allows Russian separatist forces to intercept and jam the device's video feed and data transmission, rendering them useless on the battlefield. One Ukrainian official told Reuters that they are no longer being employed on the front lines.
According to a senior Israeli military officer on Wednesday, Israel has informed the United States that Lebanese Hezbollah fighters in Syria are using U.S. armored personnel carriers originally supplied to the Lebanese army. Last month, the U.S. State Department said that they were investigating images on social media which appear to show Hezbollah, which supports President Bashar al-Assad, using U.S. military equipment in Syria. Western diplomatic sources have now said the APCs were delivered to the Lebanese army by the United States as part of a program to equip that force.
Further north, near the city of Al-Bab, the Turkish military says 14 soldiers have been killed and 33 others wounded in fierce clashes with Daesh militants. The Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army entered the terror group's stronghold for the first time since the operation started.
Now, the Operation Euphrates Shield forces, these Turkey-backed forces, have been moving slowly against Daesh over recent months. They took Jarablus and Dabiq earlier in the conflict, but Al-Bab has been particularly hard to take. Daesh are much more heavily dug in Al-Bab, and it's proven more difficult. But this potentially could be the end game in this town. As for other areas of northern Syria, the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, have been also taking more and more territory from Daesh. They've been taking several villages and have been bolstering their position on the eastern bank of the Euphrates River as they attempt to head towards Daesh's the main city under Daesh's control, Raqqa. But this is where the awkwardness in the situation comes in, because the SDF is predominantly made up of the YPG. Now, Turkey considers the YPG a terrorist organization, but the Americans, Turkey's ally, backs the YPG and the SDF against Daesh.
Train as if you're at war and always be ready to fire. That's the gist of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's orders to his troops at a recent rocket-firing contest. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Wednesday that Kim observed an artillery contest involving multiple launch rocket system batteries and called for intensified exercises both day and night so the troops would be capable of hitting targets any time. MLRS batteries are known to fire projectiles over a distance of some 40 kilometers. According to the KCNA, Kim Jong-un also observed a nighttime combat flight drill to ensure the country's fighter jets are ready for a sudden and precise raid on an object at night. Also part of this are the North's artillery drills, which focus on striking military targets in South Korea, and a simulated attack on the presidential office of Cheongwade earlier this month.
South Sudan is on the brink of genocide, and the U.S. might be able to stop it. One estimate says some 50,000 people have died in just the past 2 years, but the world has largely stopped watching. Civilians are suffering the most. Nearly 3 million people have been displaced. The U.S. is intertwined in the conflict there and is South Sudan's largest source of funds. The U.S. helped South Sudan gain independence, but as political turmoil has increased in the country, the U.S. has threatened to stop offering aid.
This week, the UK's Charity Commission dismissed an application to verify Jediism as a religion coming from a group calling itself the Temple of the Jedi Order. The commission ruled that its statement that material drawn from Star Wars films, books, and other media were not considered to be sufficiently serious. The first Temple of the Jedi Order ranks as one of Britain's biggest faiths after 390,000 people submitted it as their religious practice in a census back in 2001. The first temple is an entirely web-based organization, and the Jedi are predominantly, if not exclusively, an online community.
49-year-old Marlene is an events organizer at a public library in the Belgian city of Antwerp. She's been living as a woman since 2005, but has no plans to undergo gender reassignment surgery. Until now, that means she can't change her gender on official documents and is still registered as a man.
I decide. I need to decide for myself. I know who I am, not people telling me who I am. So I don't need a doctor telling me that I'm a woman, because I know what I am. And I don't need a doctor telling me that I can change my first name, because my first name is important to me, but not for the doctor.
A new law in Belgium is soon to make it possible for people like Marlene to change their gender legally without approval from doctors. The transgender bill is expected to pass through the Belgian parliament. The transgender bill was proposed by two centre-right politicians, but has broad support across most parties here at the parliament in Brussels. But the bill would allow children as young as 12 to change their names to fit their gender identity. Far-right groups say that's going too far.
It's completely crazy. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. If you're still male, you put on your passport you're female. There should be an operation before it. It's common sense, common logic.
Republicans want to pass the First Amendment Defense Act, FADA, which will likely succeed because of a Republican-controlled House and the backing of President-elect Donald Trump. The act will protect the rights of all entities to refuse service to LGBTQ people based on two sets of beliefs. One, marriage is or should be recognized as the union of one man and one woman, or two, sexual relations are properly reserved to such a marriage. FADA allows individuals and businesses to sue the federal government for interfering in their right to discriminate against LGBTQ people, and would mandate the Attorney General defend the businesses.
Texas is going to end Planned Parenthood's Medicaid funding. An official letter to the organization gave it 15 days to request an administrative hearing with the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, according to the Texas Tribune. If Planned Parenthood doesn't, the state will cut off the $3.1 million in Medicaid funds. The letter points to a video that shows a Planned Parenthood worker talking about selling fetal tissue as evidence that Planned Parenthood violated state and federal law. A Texas grand jury found the claims of illegal activity raised by that video were groundless. It did, however, indict the two anti-abortion activists who made the video for tampering with federal records. A Planned Parenthood official told the Texas Tribune it'll double down on an existing lawsuit fighting the funding cut and will continue to serve Medicaid patients.
Hey, buddy. You can hear us, huh? You can hear us. We love that. We're so excited.
There's my big buddy. There's my big buddy.
Sweet baby. Aren't you? Hi.
This is the coolest day ever.
Hi, handsome boy.
There's my boy.
Hey, Bubba.
Well, a young student gets a roadside lesson in driver safety and a lesson in looking sharp. It seems Trevor Kenny was speeding in Wisconsin looking for a friend to help him tie his necktie before a big class presentation. A police officer pulled him over and then showed him how to tie the perfect knot.
He knows how to tie ties, and I honestly don't know how to.
Where's your tie?
Right here.
While I do this, why don't you grab your proof of insurance and your driver's license quick?
I mean, that's really nice, right? Good news, the officer let Trevor off with a warning and a properly tied tie. No word, by the way, on whether it was a half or full Windsor. But we did learn that Trevor said his presentation went well. And we were just discussing on set that it can be difficult,
Yes.
to learn this technique. So, way to go, Trevor. And way to go, cop.
Good for you, officer.